for watching NTD Business. Coming up, good news for the workers. The latest government indicator for layoffs hit a 5-month low, despite the Federal Reserve's efforts to cool off the job market. And the NATO military alliance weighs in on the gas leaks in Europe, warning it will take action if anyone attacks its members' infrastructure. And the Chinese yuan is weakening against the dollar fast, prompting a strong warning from the Chinese central bank against speculation. That and much more coming up on NTD Business. Great to have you with us. Don Ma here for NTD Business. And good news for people working or looking for work. The latest government data today show companies are doing their best to hold on to workers. Fewer Americans applied for jobless benefits last week. Actually, it's the lowest level in 5 months. One analyst says the low layoff numbers, quote, fly in the face of the Federal Reserve's efforts to weaken the labor market. Meanwhile, the Fed's favorite inflation indicator was revised up for the second quarter, meaning inflation was actually higher than originally thought. And the market tumbled today after this news. We'll have more on that in just a moment. But apparently Amazon is one of those employers holding on to its workers. It just announced yesterday that some of its workers will soon be making more money. It says the pay increase will happen next month. That means the average starting pay will jump to $19 an hour. That'll be for warehouse workers and delivery drivers. The raise comes ahead of the busy holiday season and at a time when Amazon workers are planning to unionize. One Amazon facility near Albany, New York is setting to hold a union election next month. And turning to Wall Street, big sell-off on the market today. Although the major indexes did reverse some earlier losses late in the day, still the S&P hit its lowest point since November 2020. It fell 79 points or 2 1/10%. The Dow lost 458 points or 1.5%, and the Nasdaq dropped 314 points or 2 8/10%. And on the European market, Porsche roared on to the Frankfurt Stock Exchange today. It debuted with a valuation of over $72 billion. It's one of Europe's biggest listings ever. Porsche's CEO is praising the debut.
We are convinced there is more inside us. We will achieve independence and even greater entrepreneurial leeway. We want to become even faster, more flexible and more focused. Porsche will be able to continue to profit from the synergies within the Volkswagen Group.
The listing values Porsche at nearly the same price as its parent firm, Volkswagen, and ahead of rivals like Ferrari. In all, it should generate around $19 billion for Volkswagen. That'll likely be used to help fund its shift to electric cars. VW says despite market turmoil, now is the perfect time to list, because fund managers are sorely in need of a stable and attractive stock to invest in. Porsche shares closed flat today. And add NATO to the list of those questioning the leaks in Europe's natural gas pipelines this week. Today, NATO said it believes those leaks were the result of sabotage. It didn't say, though, who it thinks is responsible, but it did issue a warning, saying it would retaliate for any attacks on critical infrastructure of its member states. The first leaks were reported Tuesday in 2 pipelines extending from Russia to Germany. Seismologists say there were explosions before the leaks. All this comes as Europe faces soaring natural gas prices amid an energy crisis. Russia, a major supplier to Europe, cut off deliveries earlier this year. It was retaliating for sanctions imposed over its conflict in Ukraine. Many blame Russia for the leaks, but Russia denies it. And with the natural gas supply from Russia decreasing, people in Europe are suffering from high energy costs. Germany today just announced an aid package of up to nearly $200 billion by taking on new loans to help reduce soaring energy prices. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said the measure was necessary at a news conference in Berlin. He added that the aid package would reduce gas prices for individuals and businesses.
What's important now is a gas price break. We put into place a commission which will make concrete suggestions in the very near future. But what's possible now is that it can use the means for prices to come down for consumers across the country, for families, for retirees, for workers, but also for small and large companies.
Meanwhile, the German economy is heading towards a possible recession. And this all comes as inflation in Germany hit its highest level since 1996. And the European Central Bank this month made its largest ever interest rate increase to fight inflation. It feels like everyone is criticizing UK Prime Minister Liz Truss's tax cuts. Leading financial figures around the world are saying things like it's pouring gasoline on the fire, or they're shooting themselves in the foot, and it's a blunder. Even the IMF joined in. But the woman at the center of all these attacks, Liz Truss, has doubled down. In a very, very contentious BBC interview, Truss says it was a difficult decision, but the government has done the right thing.
What actions are you going to reverse what was announced in the mini budget in order to at least make things better now for my listeners who are not sleeping at night?
I don't accept the premise of the question. The action we've taken has been helping people with their fuel bills. That will start off this weekend. It's been helping people with their tax bills. People are going to pay less national insurance. But we are facing difficult economic times. I don't deny this. This is a global problem. But what is absolutely right is the UK government has stepped in and acted.
So what's happening? Is Truss indeed pouring gasoline on the fire, or does her tax plan have merit? Despite the criticism, the big bond sell-off and the drop in the pound. Tax cuts are supposed to create economic growth because people would have more money to spend, and companies will have more money to grow. But many are worried the tax cuts are coming during a time of high inflation. Inflation means having too much money in the economy, and tax cuts put even more money in the economy. Economists have always had wildly different opinions. One prominent economist, Brian Dimitrevich, is going against the mainstream criticism of Truss. He's a scholar at the Laffer Center. Dimitrevich says Truss's plan is actually outstanding.
In a high inflation and possibly recessionary environment, this is exactly the kind of tax cut you want, because it's primarily a tax cut on the highest earners. So the highest earners have the most likelihood on seeing their rate of return after tax increase of deploying more money into economic enterprises. And that means more supply. If there's more supply, inflation will go down and economic growth will go up. So you will solve both halves of the stagflation problem.
In other words, using the high earners to grow the economy. Dimitrevich is, as I said, a scholar at the Laffer Center. He works very closely with economists known as the father of supply-side economics. Arthur Laffer is the inventor of the Laffer curve. This is the idea that lowering tax rates can at times bring in more revenue, not less. The concept is that the increased economic growth will result in more tax revenue despite lower tax rates. Dimitrevich says this almost always happens when you give high earners the cut. And there's more revenue, then all the talk about having to borrow more will be irrelevant. And this isn't purely theoretical. Dimitrevich says there's a good example from American history.
The first great tax cut of the American supply side era, the foundational one, was the November 1978 capital gains tax rate cut, which took that top rate at times up to 49% it was, down to 28%. And virtually all economic historians and business people now regard that as the origin of the venture capital boom. And the dollar tanked on that news as the bill was wending its way through Congress. The dollar had only been on flexible rates for a few years, and it went to its lowest level ever in the fall of 1978. This ended up being the most historic buying opportunity in modern investment history because, of course, the tech boom would be financed by that capital gains rate cut.